Hi, everybody. Welcome. Lisa Beth, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dan Ayala, and I'm the founder of MentorCore, and we're dealing with some new technology today, so bear with us. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. We've got a great presentation for you all. Those of you who are in the Zoom, welcome. We're also doing something a little unique today. We're live streaming and simulcasting to YouTube. So we've got a double-barreled approach. We want to try and do all we can to get the message out around the various programs we've got for MentorCore. So everybody knows I'm Dan Ayala. I'm one of the co-founders here at MentorCore, along with my partner Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. My name is Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. I am a compliance, ethics, corporate governance strategist, and I run the consulting firm Lumen Worldwide Endeavors, as well as I act as one of the co-founders of MentorCore alongside my buddy Dan. And we are so thrilled today because we're getting to do what we love the most, which is bringing together people from the compliance, security, and risk professions to talk about what's really important to all of us. We love creating community. We love learning from each other. And this event today is near and dear to my heart for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, we've got a phenomenal guest, absolutely phenomenal guest, Nadine Jones, who is not only a compliance professional, but has dedicated part of her life and part of her life's work to the Blue and Black partnership. And you're going to hear more about that in just a moment. But Nadine is an amazing person. And so we're so happy that we can bring this to you today, that there's an opportunity for you to ask questions, find out more, and hear how the skills that we use every day in the compliance, security, and risk professions can be used not just for our jobs, our careers, our professions, but also to make the world a better place. So with that, welcome to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, Nadine.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful intro. My name is Nadine Jones. I am a 2003 Howard Law School graduate. I'm a corporate attorney. I have built compliance programs. I serve as the executive director of an organization called the Initiative Advancing the Blue and Black Partnership. And that's what we are going to talk about today.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about how you got your start in the professional world. What drew you to the law? What drew you to what you're doing now? Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Sure, absolutely. So I started Howard Law School, and that was just an incredible, wonderful experience. And like most, or like many law school graduates in the DC area, I stayed within the what we call the DMV, right? The DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and worked for a wonderful law firm downtown DC. I focused in antitrust. And as a matter of fact, you had your guest speaker at the last session, Bob Muscola, was my mentor. at that law firm, and he's
Oh,
still
that's great.
mentoring me. How many years later? Like 20 years later, right? So that's what started. I love antitrust. I love my work, but then I was seconded, which is like I joined one of our corporate clients' legal department, and I lived in Richmond, Virginia, Monday through Thursday, and I worked in their corporate department, and that's when I really kind of fell in love with law from an in-house perspective. I loved the contacts, the cross-functional contacts. When you're in a law firm, I mean, you're mostly just talking to other lawyers, right? When you're in a corporation, you have to be able to communicate and persuade across a wide spectrum of interests and skill sets. And I loved it. And so after, for a variety of reasons, I wanted to move in-house, and I built up a compliance program for a major logistics company in Jersey City. And that's when I got I wouldn't say my first taste with compliance. I did experience a lot of compliance building when I was seconded with the law firm's client, but that's when I got a wider spectrum. So, and I still love it.
So, did you wake up one morning when you were a child and just say, I'm going to be a lawyer?
My parents would tell you yes. I'm always trying to find that wiggle room, the loophole. So they might have told you yes. My mom was actually disappointed. She always wanted me to be a teacher. So I don't know if she's gotten over that yet. But I love the intersection of theory and facts. I did not enjoy undergrad too much because it was a lot of academia, just a lot of theory. What I love about the legal world, about law school and the practice of law is it doesn't really work until the rubber hits the road. It has to connect with facts. So I love that part of it. I really do.
That's fantastic. So you went through your legal career, you decided that you wanted to be in-house. And, at some point, you started moving from kind of antitrust into more of the compliance realm. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, like many compliance professionals, right? Sometimes there are incidents, right? Something has happened where now the role or the need for compliance takes on a bigger perspective or need. And the company that I went to work for had just kind of come out of an antitrust situation, let's call it, very public. I'm not telling any tales out of school here.
Right.
An antitrust industry-wide matter, and so there was a very real, tangible sense of what could go wrong and the impact it could have on an organization. And that's when I joined the company to not just focus on antitrust, but of course my antitrust background, I'm sure, is what made me attractive as a candidate. But you're right, it was much, much broader. FCPA, right? Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, conflicts of interest, the entire code of conduct policy, really. We just went all in, and the organization invested a lot of resources and money globally to really to take it up to a much, much higher level. Let's put it that way. So that was the genesis of my work with the company.
Fantastic. And I think one of the things that's important for people to realize is there are opportunities along the way for you to take on additional responsibility and learn new areas. Just because you start in one doesn't mean that's the end of the road.
Absolutely. And you kind of, as we get more into the initiative, you carry it with you. You don't have to compartmentalize. I mean, I guess to some, it really doesn't make sense. How do you go from antitrust to corporate in-house and negotiating contracts and trade controls, and now you're working with police chiefs and community-based organizations? But you'd be amazed at how much experience and consistency there is across different areas. So you don't have to block yourself out. Just expand. and keep collecting more knowledge and expand your network.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the initiative that you've been doing. So can you tell me the story of what prompted you? Because I understand that you took a sabbatical. What prompted you to move forward with that?
Well, it was a lot was going on. I don't need to tell everyone on this call, on this meeting, you know, a lot was going on in the summer of 2020. It was probably trauma, just heaped on top of trauma, right? And a lot of frustration. And the frustration actually came from my compliance background and insight as a compliance professional, which I'm going to touch on really, you know, in just a moment. But in terms of chronologically, you know, it started with the Ahmaud Arbery video that went viral. And this has been a tough week for me, so just bear with me. It started with that video, which came out in April, but we now know he was killed in February. And it looked like somebody, you know, like just a dude jogging in a pretty sleepy town. No disrespect to the town. And then he kind of gets corralled and then shot on the street. And then the people who shot him went home. Like, I couldn't process it. I really could not process it. And then on the heels, at least it felt like on the heels of that, the viral video of George Floyd came out, where we're all working from home, or many of us working from home at this point. You're just kind of transfixed as they loop the pleading for breath and the what to me was appeared to be torture of somebody in front of my eyes. Like I couldn't really process it. Myself and the other co-founders of the initiative couldn't process it. And I will just put something out here. I don't purport to speak on behalf of all Black people in America, but many of us, we automatically transpose like the image of the person with a member of our own family. It's our son, it's our father, it's our husband, it's our daughter. And it's not healthy. I'm not saying it is. Part of it could be that at our core, we believe that the only reason why that person is in that position is because of their Black skin. And so since my son has Black skin, that could be him. That is an analysis that's probably done in like a nanosecond. So that was where we were. And I'm talking about the co-founders. And you know, once you get to the point where you're like sobbing in between Zoom calls, something's not right. Like I used to wait for my son to go on lunch, right? Because he's home with me. I don't dare fall apart in front of him. He was 9 at the time. And so like I'm sobbing uncontrollably when he's on his snack break. Like it's just not sustainable. And so we made a decision. We analyzed a lot of the facts known at the time in terms of the industry. And the frustration came from all of the discussion about we need more policies, we need more guidelines, we need to litigate, we need to, you know, there's not enough transparency. And I'm not saying no to any of those things, not at all. But one, you need to understand that we were thinking in terms of where ordinary people live, which is where our families are. We just live in the world where the rubber hits the road. And also our compliance background was such that it was very frustrating to hear people talk about passing, you know, a 200-page statute and thinking that that somehow is going to permeate and affect culture on a day-to-day level. And that's the sticking point. That is where you, as a compliance professional, you have an insight that so many other areas do not have, namely that it takes a concerted and a very sustained effort to take values and principles as written on paper and infuse that throughout an organization so that it can impact day-to-day activity. It impacts day-to-day work. If you don't do that, you kind of have what, the sentencing guidelines might refer to as a check the box paper compliance program only. You have got to connect with the people who are actually going to be impacted by your policies and the other compliance measures you want to come out. And there's a whole industry that we are a part of that focuses only on bridging that gap from paper to culture.
Boy, we talk a lot about, paper programs and check the box activities because it is one of the key reasons that compliance, security, risk programs fail is, you can put pretty words on paper all day long, but if they don't actually do anything beyond live on paper, then you're not impacting anything.
Exactly. So, when we launched the initiative, we honed in very quickly on effective community policing and, hold that thought in terms of effective. Think about it in the compliance world where it's an effective compliance program is what's recognized under, let's say, the sentencing guidelines, for example. So we honed in on effective community policing pretty early on, but we also embedded in our name, we understood that it has to be done in a collaborative way. So that's why we said it was the blue and black partnership. Because if you are rolling out policies in a silo, in isolation from the people that it's intended to impact, or rolling out changes and processes, you're going to get a paper program. You're not going to connect. You actually might have the opposite effect of breeding resentment among the people that you are supposed to be teaching, because you haven't taken time to understand their work, their business. So if you are a compliance professional and you're trying to train, for example, a particular business unit, and you don't know what they do, you really don't know what they do. You don't know any of their acronyms. That's a big thing. If you want to have credibility, you better learn those acronyms. And now you're going to tell them about, price fixing and bid rigging and all. You've already created a disconnect, and they'll sit through the training. If it's in person, if it's online, web-based, they'll sit through it. But how much is really penetrating? So your role, at least I see the role of compliance, is one where you translate the law or the policy or the guidelines or whatever the paper document is. You translate it in such a way that it becomes meaningful and real to the stakeholders. And also, you need to kind of get buy-in. And I know folks are going to think, what buy-in do we need to get from the police? It's their job. It's their job. Why do we need buy-in? Okay, so when I was transitioning out of the firm into the corporate world, and my scope was going to be much broader, trade controls, like with OFAC, I knew antitrust. I got that. Bribery, FCPA, I had to get up to speed. And I remember speaking with a senior partner at the time who in the UK, but she was well known in the space of FCPA compliance. And I asked him, well, what do I tell people? Just don't bribe. Honestly, why is that a thing? I think I might have said that.
Right. Don't do bad things.
Yeah, just don't bribe, honestly. And, with her lovely British accent, it's nothing like a Brit to make you feel stupid when they say, well, Nadine, think about it this way. Drinking and driving, everyone knows that's not the thing to do, right? And yet people still do it. So she was basically saying you need to tell them why it's not in their better interest to take a chance, why it's not in their better interest to, create an invoice that is masking something else, why it's not worth it to the company or to their reputation to do X, Y, and Z. And that is where the buy-in comes from, especially if you are going into an industry, and it can be policing, it could be corporate, that has been doing things in a certain way for many, many years. and then boom, a policy hits or statute hits, or like the FCPA comes alive. I mean, the FCPA was passed like in 1977. It really only came alive, I would say 2008, 2010 or something like that. And all of a sudden, now you have to change how you do things. You've got folks saying, you know what, I've been successful doing things a certain way my entire career. I'm not about to change now. You could put whatever rules you want to put. I'll just find a way to kind of do what? Work around it.
Right.
And you start getting workarounds, and you start driving down underground the very same behavior that you're trying to modify, because they don't believe in what you're doing. They think it's stupid. Right?
Right.
So you have to get buy-in in that way. It's not a permission to violate policy or to violate the law. When I use the word buy-in, you just have to kind of get out in front of the compliance initiative and explain to stakeholders why it's better for them to do things the right way.
Absolutely. And, I know that there's, one of the things that compliance has struggled with for a very long time is being seen as punitive. And to the extent that something is perceived as punitive, instead of additive or enhancing, people tend to do the least possible to make the pain stop. And so,
Right.
this is one of those key skills that people need to develop, because if you have people who are just trying to work around or, make the pain stop, they are really just trying to do the least possible.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Absolutely.
in that same vein, we had a question come in. It's around this same topic. Many times people think that in compliance through the lens of they think of it through the corporate lens rather than other professional industries. For example, and the example that was given was nonprofit. What does compliance look like through the lens of these alternative industries, not-for-profit, higher ed, where there's different motivators?
Well, you need to connect with your stakeholders. So that's on you as the compliance professional to find out what motivates the stakeholders. And you're right, it could very well be different. Even within the corporate space, you have different people that react to different things. I mean, I've used, if there's a violation, you can't compete in the next RFP, will be disqualified. And that might be something that moves a person to say, oh, wow, okay, I didn't realize that could affect my ability to compete for
Right.
business. And others, it could be just you applied a moral base. It could be, your margins. Do you really want to give all your profits to the Department of Justice? No disrespect if we've got DOJ folks listening.
Well, I think
Right.
the
So
intent, that's not necessarily their intended destination for those profits. How about that?
right, exactly. So different people respond to different points. Your challenge as a compliance professional is to connect. You have to find what is going to connect with your stakeholders. And so in that sense, it's not very different than if you are in a corporate space, a nonprofit space. So for instance, in a nonprofit space, you might say, hey, if we run afoul of some of these provisions or laws, I mean, I imagine FCPA applies, especially if you're doing work in other countries. Think about the damage that would have on our reputation. We would lose credibility. We might lose access to funding. How much clean water can we produce if we don't have access to these things? So whatever it is that you need to connect with people, the key is you have to connect. You have to find what appeals to them. And that can be a challenge. And to do that, you have to spend time with the business units, with the functional units. You need to know what they do. It's a people industry. Once you get siloed as a compliance professional, you run the risk of it becoming a paper program, of a check the box program. It is a people relationship based profession.
I was having a similar discussion earlier today about just the need for relationships and security and incident response. People need to have to get in touch with you and not want to fear it, not want to dread it, because water's going to find its way. People who want to get things done, they'll either come and ask, or if they can't get to you to do the ask, they'll go around or find the process will find a way through.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And think about that in the context now of blue and black relationships, right? So there's a lot of activity going on in the legislative space at the local level. There's a lot of talk even at the federal level, certainly at the state level, all very important things. But as a compliance professional, we can't leave people to find their own way to figure out what all of these changes mean to them, because they might arrive at a conclusion that you didn't anticipate. So it is not a profession that I have seen thus far where they have a dedicated compliance professional geared toward infusing values and policies in the culture. I just haven't seen it. I haven't interviewed or spoken with all 18,000 police agencies in this country. So I'll just put that out there. But I haven't seen it. But there are a lot of changes taking place. And it's not clear to me that there's anyone there to kind of communicate to rank and file, to Foot Patrol, to SWAT, to all members within the blue community, to show them how it's going to impact them and explain the changes and why it's to their benefit to be open and to show them, connect with them in those areas that they care about. And I haven't read the legislation, things that have been happening. There's one city where qualified immunity has been revoked by statute or by, ordinance, whatever the case may be. And I'm not against that. I mean, I'm a Black woman, the mother of a Black son. I get it. I totally get it. But the compliance part of me is like, do you want to leave such a radical change to be figured out by Foot Patrol? Not that they aren't intelligent enough to understand, but they might arrive at their own conclusion. So if I were a compliance officer for that district, I would want to get out in front and explain to them that this is not for you now to bury or to hide things related to a colleague because you're afraid they might lose their house, they might lose their pension, the stakes are that much higher, the kids' college funds can go up in the air. Oh my gosh, we need to protect each other. We need to protect each other. I would posit it as how you protect your brother or sister or, in blue is when you see something, you intervene early. Don't let it get to the point where qualified immunity even becomes an issue. Get in there. Your protection and your love for your colleague is going to be grounded in you seeing something and intervening early if you see a colleague struggling, because the stakes are so high. Because the stakes are so high, you don't want them to lose their house. You don't want them to lose their pension. You don't, right? That's how I would do it. So that's just an example.
These are fantastic examples. And I think, one of the challenges that you run into is, unlike a corporation, unlike an organization, every community is a little bit different. And you mentioned that. And one of the things I'm curious about is there culture that is consistent, or is it literally a community by community engagement that needs to happen?
It's kind of, the answer is yes to both. It is very nuanced and very local. There is no one community is the same, but yet by the same token, there seems to be a best practices for how to do it well. And like, for instance, in the area of community policing, after speaking with different agencies and chiefs from different, from the South, from the Northeast, from Middle America, there you start to loop. You start to see that a lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same issues are consistent across the board. So I do think that there's an opportunity to kind of like have like a base that's consistent. from which each individual community can then apply their nuances. If that answers the question, we built a scorecard to provide some consistency and benchmarking. And if there's time, I will demo that, for you. But the concept is that there is continuity. And, here's the kicker. We're all kind of human beings and we all respond to the same thing. It really is. If you speak to people a certain way, I mean, there's a whole area in policing called procedural justice. Security folks might, have some knowledge about that. But it really is just like a 4-step plan on how to interact with civilians. You give them a voice. So you listen, right? You give them a voice. You speak to them respectfully. You explain your reasons for, let's say it's a traffic stop, as being neutral, so that they don't feel like they have been targeted. And you give them a voice. Ma'am, why did you run through that stop sign? Give them an opportunity to explain. The results, apparently, greater minds than mine have done studies on this. It's just phenomenal. Even if you write a ticket for the traffic violation, the person leaves the interaction, the exchange, feeling positive about the interaction. And it's just in terms of how we've engaged with each other. So we are remarkably the same in so many ways, for good and for not so good. Yes.
So we had a question in the chat that I think it would be interesting for you to answer. What was something that you learned through your time with the Blue and Black Partnership Initiative that wasn't obvious before? And for people who are newer to the compliance and community relations sphere, do you have any advice based on what you've learned?
But my biggest takeaway is, I'm sorry for the beeping in the background if you can hear it. They're doing construction. It's my biggest takeaway is you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You can't just be in comfortable spaces. That's not how you get progress. I've learned that certain goals cannot be achieved in isolation. You can be right. You can be isolated and stand firm and kind of be right, I guess. But that's not the solution we were going for. We wanted safer communities. We wanted to be safer, feel safer. And we knew right away to do that, we were going to have to engage with, at the onset of this organization, with professionals in an industry where we felt could be hostile. I'll be perfectly honest with you. But we were all professionals. We're like, we can work with anyone. We will be respectful. We will learn. What I didn't expect, to answer the question, was to develop really strong and genuine relationships with members of the Blue community. I did not see that coming. I wasn't against it. I just didn't see it coming. And the reason why, I think, is we had a unity in purpose. We both wanted the same thing, which was, we've got to do better. We have got to do better in terms of our interactions. Forget about the talking heads and this and that. We're talking about people where they live, where they work, where they live. And we knew that we need each other in order to have a better environment. So that was the first one. And constant interaction in a positive way, back to procedural justice. And if you are willing to be stretched a little in your thinking, in your approach, to be open to different views, which can be really, really, really uncomfortable in this space, little small miracles can happen, and I would chalk that up to a miracle to form strong relationships with members of the blue community, Black officers, white officers, and in between. But they're all blue. They're all definitely police in their outlook, and really form strong, powerful allies and relationships there. That was a surprise.
Nadine,
That's
another question that came in is around talking about tone at the top. This is something we talk about across all of our industries, be it security or compliance or ethics. But how can we apply this back? And the question was, how do we navigate a police department that isn't or doesn't seem interested in community engagement? How do you suggest navigating those competing relations, and how does that play a role in community engagement?
Okay, that came from a question from somebody who doesn't like me, because that's the hardest question. No, but they're absolutely right. Oh, so okay, you're out to get me. No, I'm just joking. It doesn't work. I'll be honest. This one consistent thing that I've seen, a consistency in this field, is it's picture it as a paramilitary approach. Tone at the top is everything. It really is everything. So it can work for you as a compliance professional, and it can work against you as a compliance professional. If you can convince the commander, the director, the chief, some police agencies are so big that it's the captain, that is actually the head of the precinct, which is in itself a mini agency. If you can get their buy-in that community engagement and community policing is the way to go, not to the exclusion of enforcement, not to the exclusion of needing to be a warrior in terms of mindset, but in addition to, if you can convince that chief, everyone kind of falls into line. And if you have a chief that is very charismatic and very tactile, very hands-on with the rank and file within the agency, he or she, they will communicate their values throughout the organization, and folks will fall in line. If they can't or don't, you find that they will just leave that particular agency. So it's incredibly powerful, the tone at the top. Now, if your tone at the top is community policing is, hug a thug policing, that's a quote, hug a thug. There's no amount of persuasion that you can do to get the rest of the organization, the rest of the agency to fall in line. There really is little place for them to go. It's not like a corporation where even if you have a C-suite that is kind of like, they're disconnected from what's going on, but you have members or employees within the organization that are really pushing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're really pushing for certain things. And it can kind of, from bottom up, it can have an influence where the company is like, you know what, we've seen the light and we're going to go in this direction. I have not seen that in this industry, in this profession. It is very much top down.
Well, I can see that makes a huge difference, right? We always do say that the fish rots from the head. And so if you are having problems with tone, it is very much impacted by leadership. And that I think you see that in companies as well. And it seems even more so in enforcement areas. So let's go back to what you're doing at the initiative, the Blue and Black Partnership. So as you started putting this together, you took some time to just really focus on this. What were the key things that you wanted to accomplish? And what are you doing right now with your work in this space and with the work of all the co-founders to make a difference right now?
What we really wanted to focus on was to measure what works and have some type of data tracking what works. Again, that's coming back to our compliance world. So, is it the once a year Girl Scout cookies that we're handing out with the police and citizen? Is that the game changer, or is it more involved than that? And so we did a lot of research. The last two administrations ago, President Obama's administration came up with a report, 21st Century Policing. It's really all about community policing. Excellent, really well done. It's just like 200 pages, right? So we read it, and we also interviewed members from the Blue community who were on board from day one. That's another, back to that question, that was something I didn't anticipate. On board from day one, and working with them. And we created, okay, this looks like this is going to work. And we created a scorecard. And then we overlaid it with data, so that each agency can kind of gauge over time, a continuous improvement over time, to see what works and what doesn't work in the space of community policing. So measurement was a big thing. Training was another big area. So we have developed e-learning module for law enforcement. We partnered with a corporate ethics and compliance platform developer called, I don't think they'll mind, they're LRN. And we developed a mindfulness training, which I think is just fabulous, for law enforcement. We had the input of those who are in that space. And it's going to sit on a platform that will allow folks to, at the end of your online training, you get that nice little certificate showing that, you've completed your training. You get all of that. Whoever's managing the program can see, oh, Dan didn't take his training. Lisa Beth did. Nadine, you're kind of late, right? It sits on that type of platform. So that is one of many modules that we expect and hope and plan to produce with LRN, which did it on a pro bono basis. On a pro bono basis, they gave us excellence. Really, they really did. And that is also running in parallel. So if the police agency completes the scorecard, gets its score, we have recommendations. We have a whole toolkit, which is really our network of providers that we can recommend. It looks like you might need some anti-bias training. Here's someone that we can recommend for you. Maybe you need some active bystander training for your officers. Maybe it's organizational, and we are going through a certification process with consultants that can help them there. Or maybe it's officer wellness. And so we are offering these online trainings to police agencies, similar to what we would do in the corporate world for compliance. Same thing.
That's great.
Amazing. So you've been working on all of this, and one of the things that you mentioned was a scorecard, and how you're using a scorecard to help. Can you talk a little bit about this? I know we use metrics a lot in compliance and in security. What about this scorecard, and what does that look like?
Well, I'm going to share my screen. And this is
we're going to hope the technology works.
I know, right? Oh, look at that. Can you see that?
I can, and
can
there it
you,
is.
Yeah, can everyone on the Zoom see it as well?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, because now I can't see anybody. All I see is the screen card. So this is our community policing scorecard. It's called Central. And you're looking at the score of a real agency. And what we have discovered is that in order for an agency to do community policing well, they need to be developed in each of these three categories. Community engagement, yeah, you do need to have coffee with a cop and other types of positive engagements with the community, but you also need officer training, right? So look, maybe this type of policing is intuitive and comes naturally to many officers. Maybe it doesn't. It doesn't mean you kind of throw people away. You equip them, you train them in procedural justice, in anti-bias training, in cultural awareness, in trauma-informed training. So there's a whole category for officer training along the lines of the topics that I just touched on. And then organizational development. How are you promoting your officers, right? If you're promoting the ones that, issue the most tickets, then you're going to get more tickets. Don't cry about community policing is not being done. You are incentivizing your officers to write tickets. But if you are incentivizing your officers to engage in proactive, collaborative policing with members of the community, such that you highlight those successes where the police and the community collaborated to solve a particular safety issue. Maybe it's a speed bump. Maybe it's a new street lamps that, it could be anything. It could be big, it could be small. But if you are rewarding officers or praising or recognizing those efforts, then that's what you're going to get more of, which would be aligned with community policing. So this scorecard is basically a breakdown of those three categories. Oh, there's a bit of a delay as I'm trying to go to another screen. And each of the categories has subcategories here. So community engagement includes, do you have like a customer service type of policy within your agency? You'd be amazed at how many police agencies don't. They're not very, what's the right word? Responsive to the consumers of their services. It's very internal facing, which was strange for us coming from the corporate world, right? Where we are very in tune with our customers' response and reactions to goods and services. So that was interesting to see that they will talk internally about what the community needs, but they don't really talk to the community or assess themselves against that. The ones that do community policing well have a very much a customer service mindset. Organizational development is, how do you promote, how do you discipline, how do you track incidents? Are you tracking use of force incidents for a learning opportunity, a teaching opportunity for your officers? And officer wellness is a component of organizational development. So the dark blue bar is the agency that completed the scorecard. The light blue is the benchmark. And you can see that there is a drop-off in wellness for both, right? And that is consistent in our engagements with officers. There is definitely some stigma, maybe is too strong of a word, maybe it's not, but there's definitely a reluctance to acknowledge officer wellness, and there's some defensiveness about it, which is why we came out with the mindfulness training out the gate.
Well, that's one. That aligns with so many of what Lisa Beth and I have called, in our industry, we're talking about ourselves as protectors. Same way it is hard for people in that protective role to open up, to get that kind of self-awareness. I see it in myself and in my own teams. I know Lisa Beth and I have talked with others about the same thing. So it certainly is a parallel. It's something I know that many of the people that watch this through MentorCore can relate to in their own lives as well.
Well, another one of our partners is Neuro Leadership Institute, and the whole brain science behind it is, we hope that the science will help to make it more objective and not subjective. Like, there's actually nothing wrong with you if you are in a state of constant stress, and the different parts of your brain are constantly activated. You can't you're not thinking as clearly as if you were in a calm state. So I'm coming from the corporate world. Maybe the most traumatic thing that happens to me during the day is I get an email and somebody, uppercases me. I'm like, are they yelling at me? Like, and then think about the world of policing, where it might be grandma's cat is up a tree, can you help me get it down? Or it could be an incredibly violent and nerve-wracking domestic situation. Right. Or, I don't want to trigger anyone on the call, but routine traffic stops that have just gone way awry. So if you're in a constant state of stress, or you don't even recognize that you are, how can you then bring yourself back down? And so this training that we've developed, and in partnership with other organizations, helps officers to recognize what the signs are. And we actually provide in module sessions of breathing exercises. 60 seconds. Do you feel better? The hope is that if they do it and they feel better, then they will be more intrigued to try and do it some more. So That's a great insight, Dan, and it is very much consistent in this field as well.
And I'm so glad that you're talking about this and bringing this to different areas. As Dan mentioned, this chronic stress has been something, and I am saying this partially because it is Stress Awareness Month. The 16th is actually Stress Awareness Day. And the levels of stress in a number of different professions have been going sky high. Whether it's the legal profession, where we have the well-being, the lawyer well-being statement, or compliance, security, or policing, right? People are adding stress upon stress upon stress. With the pandemic and everything else that's happening, I even see it when I'm driving, right? 70 is the new 45, apparently, on the road.
Right.
And those are all signs of people under stress. And
That's right.
We're all dealing with it. So I'm glad that you're talking about this.
Yes, we are talking about it. I'll share a quickly personal, not too personal, but personal experience for me, and before I explain this next screen here, which is about 3 months into the initiative. So my company put me on a paid sabbatical. That was their investment. They put their money where their mouth was. And I was fully funded, and it allowed me to be very much mission focused. I didn't need from my point of view, to be the right point of view. My salary didn't depend on it. I just needed us to work collectively to find what the right answer was. So it was very empowering to be mission focused. But about 3 months in, we launched in July 2020. 3 months in, I was having a call with a researcher, and she's like, "So how was your weekend? How's it going?" I'm like, "You know what? I just don't think I'm cut out for this. I'm not doing too well." And she asked me, she's like, "Okay, stop. We're not going to talk about anything else. I want you to tell me what's going on." And I explained to her what's going on. And she was the first one who explained to me about the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, words that I hadn't really heard before. And it was because of being in this space constantly of witnessing trauma, and the body doesn't distinguish between firsthand trauma or trauma that it observes or learns about, vicarious trauma. She taught me that as well. And it gave me an empathy for policing that, as I didn't even realize I had lacked that empathy. I didn't realize I didn't have that empathy. And it's unfortunate that it took me being in a state of not being able to manage what was going on in my nervous system to even have that empathy. I'm not particularly proud of that. But just 3 months in, being surrounded with all of these videos that people want to show you, some of which don't make it, to a national platform, network platform, and hearing the stories, I was in a dysregulated state, right? And that was 3 months. So picture someone who's been doing this for 3 years, 13 years, 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
Right. This is something that it's not the same world. There was one chief, and he's like, well, back in my day, you have a bourbon, you're kind of okay at the end of the shift. And I said, it's not the same. It's not the same world. It's faster. It's meaner. It's more violent. There's much more scrutiny. So there's a lot more pressure. And I said, in the same way that you would equip your officers with the best BDUs, like the military gear, and you equip them with weapons, and you train them in tactical defense training and all of those other things that you do to equip them, you also have to equip them to be able to deal with the pressures and what's going on in their bodies. And that's what officer wellness is. It's just another way to equip your officers to police in the 21st century. And he received it. He received it, and he said, "You've given me something to think about." So that's just a personal aside. I know I got to go soon because, right, I'm almost up to time. I just wanted to show you this one screen here where it's the community policing scorecard. And then we've pulled in statistics from our wonderful data analytics team, Kaizen Analytics, pulled in statistics from the FBI public-facing sites. And so you can track and see if there's any correlation, which is not the same as causation, we understand that, between a police agency's community policing scorecard and their violent crimes, their property crimes, and shootings within their jurisdiction. So we moved from a gold to a bronze community policing scorecard, and you can see some volatility. The dark blue is the agency in question, the light blue is the national benchmark, and the gray is fictitious at this point, because we don't have enough agencies in there to anonymize to get enough of a working benchmark.
Right.
So let me see if I can get back to the video. Okay.
You're back.
I'm back.
We're back.
While we're on that, the question did come in about, are there metrics that are measured? Are they fluid? Those were clearly about specific departments and locations, but are the rest of the metrics fluid? Or are they based on location, or is it a standard used across the country that you're measuring against?
It is standardized across the country. It is not geographically specific.
Mm-hmm.
We do offer we've minimized the opportunity for too much free text because we did want to standardize it. How are you doing, right? What is community policing? Where do you fall along the continuum? It's not a judgment. We just want to locate you in terms of where you fall. And so we did. It is probably the only national standardized tool right now for community policing. Everyone gets judged based on the same criteria. We might iterate as we go along. We are very comfortable building as we fly. We think that's another byproduct of being compliance professionals. But right now it is standard across the country.
That's great.
Well, fantastic. I know that we are coming up against a hard stop, and I feel like we could go for hours here. But I did want to make sure that we asked our signature question, which is, what is the best advice that you ever received from a mentor?
I've been thinking about that question, and I've had such wonderful mentors throughout my career. And I'm going to kind of flip it onto the mentee. And my advice to you is to be mentorable. I don't know if that's a word. Be open to being mentored by whoever has an interest in your progress, in your success. Some of my best mentors have been white men. So if I had ruled them out and only focused on women or women of color as caring about my career, I would have lost some of access to some of my best mentors and most of my mentors. Moving into this space of the policing, the Blue and Black Initiative, as I said, I did not expect to form really strong relationships with members of the Blue community, but I was open to it. I was uncomfortable at times, but I was open to it. And they have added such incredible insight and value to what we are doing. Can you imagine if we had closed the door on that, right? So I just encourage you as mentees to be open. Be open. Open up your network and your in-group. Have it be expanded a little bit.
That's wonderful advice, and always leave yourself open to the ideas and insights of others. It's wonderful advice. Great. Well, Nadine, we are at the end of the hour. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate this. I've learned a ton. And just insight. My sister is a prosecutor, a lifelong attorney, and I live in a town which has a lot of the same issues that you are. There's a lot of highlight to the issues that you brought up on both sides of this. So it's really nice to see very strong movements to bridge these worlds and these viewpoints in a very meaningful and beneficial way. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can say one last thing to everyone on the call, if you're like me, it's been a tough week, discouraging week, hopeless at some points, right, with everything going on. be mindful that progress is not moving at the same frequency as the harm that we are seeing, but it doesn't mean that the progress is not happening. So don't lose hope. Don't be discouraged. Process what's painful, yes, by all means, but don't be discouraged because progress is still taking place. It's just moving at a different pace. So that's what I will leave you with.
That's great advice.
Thank you for the inspiration and for helping people understand that what we do in our everyday professional lives can also be used for greater good. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I hope that everyone is able to join us for the next Mentor Course session. And please look up what Nadine is doing, the initiative, the Blue and Black Partnership. They are doing great work. So follow them on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you'll find out more.
One more time.
That's right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you again, both of you, for having me.
It is our pleasure, and we're very grateful to have you here. So thanks again, and thank you to everybody for being here. And we will see you again on the next Mentor Core live webinar. Thanks.